So, with that background information out of the way, we can get to what I've been working on recently, and that is Animal Planet. Just to recap, if I didn't mention it explicitly in the last video, I was calling my brother because I wanted to make grass runners, and I couldn't find my grass runner paper. I have it saved somewhere on my computer. The stats are somewhere, but I couldn't quite remember what abilities they had. So I called my brother up to let him know about it. Not just for that, I had other things I needed to talk to him about, but that was one of the things I wanted. And that's when I brought up the fact that I created these 5 races, and 4 of the 5 of them were based on animals. I had dogs, I had lizards, I had bears, robot bears at that, I had deer. And I said, it's like I'm making all these animal people, and I feel like my races are a little too heavy in that area. And he said, no, just go all the way. Don't stop halfway. Just make everybody an animal. Make Animal Planet. And I said, okay, you know what? I will. I'll make Animal Planet. Now, there's a lot of thought that goes into it. I am not, you know from listening to my videos, I'm not someone who just rushes into things and is able to whip out a bunch of work and be done with it. No, I have to sit there and think about things for forever in order to arrive at where I want. Now, what we're looking at right now are the Calupin racial traits that I showed you last time. These are unchanged, I believe, from what I showed you last time. They should be unchanged. I haven't opened up the Word document. But what we're going to do here is... it's going to be difficult because I can't get there. Switch to this one. And you will notice a slight change. What I've done is, first of all, you're going to see this highlighted, and we'll get to that in a little bit too. I've changed the Calupins a little bit. There's a reason why, which will come up in a moment. So I was like, okay, let's make an animal-based world. I'm going to get rid of all the standard races, and everybody's going to be kind of based on an animal. Now, that in and of itself immediately brings to mind a big problem. And that is, you need like 1,000,000 races because of all the different types of animals there are. There are role-playing games. For example, there's one called Ironclaw. And in Ironclaw, there are pages and pages. Now, when you choose a race in Ironclaw, Ironclaw is a role-playing game where everybody's kind of animal-based. And... when you choose your race, your species, your animal type, it doesn't have very many rules associated with it. It's just a little block of text. And when I say a little block, I mean way less than this. And so they fit 4 and 5 of them onto a page, along with artwork and everything. And there are pages and pages and pages of them, because... for example, there's a difference between being a house cat and being a big cat. I don't even know if I'm not sure if they break it down to like a difference between being a lion and being a tiger and being a panther. But I do know like house cat and big cat are different. I know that dog and wolf are different. Different types of birds are different. And each of them is its own little thing. And they've got their own little bonuses or penalties or quirks to them. That in a Pathfinder type game is going to wreck you, because you'd have to make up this kind of racial thing for everybody. I would have to make up a Calupin stat block for, like Mastiffs and Great Danes, and then another one for like Dobermans and German Shepherds, and then another one for like Bulldogs, and then another one for Terriers, and then another one for Golden Retrievers, and then another one for Pugs, and then another one for Chihuahuas. And it would just get ridiculous, and that's just the dogs, let alone all the other types of animals. So I said, no, that's not going to happen. Now, an example of another person I saw who did this. I was online looking for reviews of the Advanced Race Guide. I wanted to see what other people had done with the Race Builder. And I figured a review of the race guide would probably include a review of the builder. There is a thread on the Paizo forums for Pathfinder. Back when the race builder system was in beta, they let people have it, and they said, come up with races using this system. That is a very boring thread. I can't get into it at all. I can't really read other people. For the most part, what people posted was just kind of like the abilities, like I'm showing you here. I find it boring for them because, unlike what I'm giving you here, there they didn't have any explanation. There was nothing going into why they chose the abilities or anything about the races. Instead, it was just, a post, and there it is. Make sense of that. So I didn't find that very helpful. However, I did find a guy who did a review of the Advanced Race Guide, and he brought up the point of you can get rid of all the standard Pathfinder races, create a whole new set of races, and that's how you run your game. And I said, and I can't remember if I had the idea to do away with the races before I read that or after I read that, but it's all mixed together in my brain. But he said standard Pathfinder has 7 races. There's dwarves, elves, halflings, gnomes, half-elves, half-orcs, and humans. So those are the 7. But half-elves, half-orcs, and humans aren't really that different. They basically get the same kind of stuff. So there's essentially like 5 races. And so when you're making up a set of races for a game, you only need 5, 6, 7 different choices, and that's everything. That's the enough variety to get you through. So that was my goal, was somewhere between 5 and 7 races. Now this guy actually created a whole campaign world to run the Pathfinder Jade Regent adventure path. That takes place in a kind of Chinese area. It's an Asian-themed adventure path. So what he did was he decided, okay, I'm going to set this whole thing up around the Chinese zodiac. And the Chinese zodiac consists of animals. There's 12 animals. And so he made a race for each of those 12 animals. And those are who the players would get to pick their character from. And those were basically the only races that existed in the world. So there were snake people, there were rabbit people, dog people, horse people, ox people, and dragon people, rat people, so on and so forth. That's what they were dealing with. Now, he said he went overboard in making 12 races, but that was because it had to fit with the theme of the Chinese zodiac. And he had signed certain races as being good and evil and neutral and blah, blah, blah. And it all tied into the adventure. Anyway, that was more than I wanted. I also didn't want to necessarily just take races that he didn't actually present any stats. He just listed the names of the 12 races he made. He didn't provide me with any of this breakdown in the statistics. So I took that little bit of an idea. Let's get rid of all the original races. So we're just going to have the new animal-themed races I create. And in this world, they'll be the only ones that exist, and all the players will have to choose from them. Now, there's a lot of things that go into that, and there's a whole bunch of points I want to get to, and I don't want it to be too muddled. The first point was, okay, I have the Calupin, I'm going to start with them, and I actually started with the original Calupin, the other one that I showed you first. And then I said, okay, what's my next race going to be? And I thought about my Grolar, the bear people. I'm going to switch back and forth between names, by the way. So there's the Grolar. Is this a double space or a single space? That's one space. Okay, that's just a pretty big space. Now, the problem with the Grolar is they completely, well, I shouldn't say completely, but they very heavily overlap with the role of the Calupin. In the original game, so we're playing 3.0 and we have these Calupin as an optional race. They have a very warrior melee fighter kind of role to them because they have a constitution bonus. They have a bite attack. They have an extra speed so they can catch up to people. They have natural armor. These are all things that are, and they have automatic proficiency in the greatsword. So these are all things that are kind of tending to put that Calupin into the melee fighter type area. Now, when you think of a bear person, the kinds of things you'd want to give them are a strength bonus. Most likely a constitution bonus. I mean, the spell in D&D is called Bear's Endurance. That's what gives you a con bonus. So you'd think that would be there. You'd expect a bear person to have either claw attacks or a bite attack, or even both, because bears like to beat the crap out of you and rip you to shreds. So you're already seeing how they're overlapping with the fighter type ability score bonuses, the fighter type, well, I say fighter type, the natural attack the natural attacks. The fact that you're going to probably want your bear guy to be wielding a big old weapon to make use of his strength, so something like a greatsword. So they're, and something that I found out a little bit afterwards was that a bear's sense of smell is better than a dog's sense of smell. So even the fact that the Calupins had scent, it made even more sense for these bear people to have scent because a bear's sense of smell is so much better than a dog's. So there was too much overlap. So I said, you know what? Let's put the bear people aside. I'm going to eventually get to them. Let's start on something else. So obviously the very next animal that you think of when you think of animal people is... Yeah, you're probably thinking cat people, and I hate cat people. I like cats. Don't get me wrong. I'm allergic to cats, but I've always loved cats. I have a stuffed cat at home. I've had it since I was a very little kid, and I enjoy cats. But cat people are so overplayed in role-playing games. If a game has an animal-themed person, most likely it's a cat person, and second most likely is probably a rat person. Not too many games go with dog-type people. So I didn't want to use cat people. So what's the next animal that comes to mind? It doesn't matter because what I chose was rabbits. I love rabbits. Rabbits are pretty awesome. There we go. I had a pet rabbit. It was actually a graduation gift. I got him actually before I graduated, but it was a graduation gift because you buy rabbits during the Easter season. That's when they're usually on sale. And, well, I say usually on sale. That's when they're most popularly on sale. And I wanted rabbit people. Now, other than the Calupins, which already existed, for each of these new races, I had a couple goals in mind. One, for each of them, I was going to have an idea in my head of who this race needed to be. Basically, this was my iconic character of that race. The second goal I had is that I had to at least have 2 different classes or concepts or archetypes in mind for it. Now, that doesn't mean I wanted to design the race specifically for those classes or what have you. My goal is actually just to make sure that it wasn't designed against those roles. Although I did, third point, want to avoid putting the abilities on a race so focused on a particular role that you wouldn't understand why this would choose anything else. As we get to a later race, I actually think I have a problem with that race, and it's the last one the most recently designed race, so I haven't put as much refinement on it. But the idea I had for the rabbit people was from Disney's Robin Hood. You have the little rabbits, they're cute. You have Robin Hood, and at the one point in the movie, Robin Hood puts his hat on the little kid and gives him a bow and teaches him how to shoot it. So that's half of the concept for my archetype character, my iconic rabbit. And then I had from the movie Rise of the Guardians, the Easter Bunny. I kind of liked him. I liked how big he was and kind of how bottom heavy he was. Not just like big feet because he's a rabbit, but I mean he was bottom heavy. He came down in a kind of pear shape almost. So I liked that idea. And in my mind, I saw this giant hare, and he was kind of podunk and southern, and but he wasn't southern. He was actually a country boy in England because of the Robin Hood thing. But he was wearing a pair of overalls and a white linen shirt. And he had a straw hat on, and he was chewing on a blade of grass. He's got a bow. He talks real slow. But he moves real fast, and that was the important part. And I really like him. He's kind of badass. Anyway, the other concept that I had, and this is the one that I had to make sure was still viable, was a very fluffy little white bunny, but dressed up like a prince. Not Prince the music guy, but like an old Napoleonic kind of prince. You know, the kind where they're wearing like the red with the gold cords across the chest and a rapier on their side and the white pants and boots and what have you. So basically like the rabbit prince with his rapier. That had to be a viable option as well. You would think, now you can see here, I called them the Leporids. I'll get into naming in just a moment. Instead, is this a double space? No. Look at how giant this space is compared to this space. One is definitely bigger than the other, but this is just one space. That's just weird. Oh well. I decided very, very quickly that I wanted the rabbits to have a dexterity bonus and an intelligence bonus. The dexterity bonus, I mean, it's rabbits, so you would expect that to be there. The intelligence bonus, though, you have basically three options. Standard Pathfinder racial ability adjustments are one physical bonus, one mental bonus, and then a penalty to anything else. And so when you're aiming for rabbits, you would think wisdom would be a good spot to put it. Because wisdom, they've got the good ears and eyes, so you'd expect a perception bonus. They're pretty good at telling whether or not something's going to threaten them, so you'd have a sense motive bonus. Things like that. The problem is, when you think about animals in general, when you're trying to make an animal race, anything that's like smaller than a human, you want to give them a dexterity bonus. And pretty much any animal, you want to give a wisdom bonus, because wisdom just seems like, historically, I say historically, since 3rd edition, when all monsters had PC stats, animals tended to have very low intelligence because they're animals, but they tended to have normal or even bonuses to wisdom. So your natural inclination is to give all of these small animals a bonus to dexterity and a bonus to wisdom, and it fits. However, the insight that I gained in thinking about this was, you don't compare the race to humans. As a human, I think about little animals compared to my abilities. But no, there's no humans in this world. Animal Planet doesn't have humans. So you need a different baseline for comparison. Now, one of the things you might notice is different between the old Calupin and the new Calupin is that this Calupin doesn't have Sprinter anymore. Why doesn't it have Sprinter? Well, when I went through the abilities to give for the rabbits, Sprinter fit rabbits much better than it fit dogs, didn't it? Doesn't it seem like that's true? I mean, rabbits are much faster than dogs. We had to specially breed a dog called a greyhound to be fast enough to catch rabbits. That's something that we had to do. And so it made sense that rabbits would be faster than Calupins. And this also ties into the fact that you can't compare things to humans when there are no humans. You have to compare them between themselves. Now, the Calupins have a wisdom bonus, and I'm really not touching too much about the Calupins. I didn't want to change them very much from the way that they were presented. And they kind of now serve as my baseline. And these other creatures are compared to them. So Calupin kind of became my new human only because Calupin came from an outside source and it serves as a semi-objective measure. So we can see here, now I'll talk about the name real quick. When my brother came up with the name for Calupin, and if I mentioned this last time, the Latin name for a dog is Canis lupus. I think sometimes you'll even see it Canis lupus domesticus. So, it's just a domesticated Canis lupus. So he combined Canis and lupus to get Calupin. It would be like Calupus, and then you get Calupin. And for dogs, for example, you know that the adjective, you would say dogs are canine. Wolves are lupine. This combines both of those, dog and wolf. So this models dog-type people and wolf-type people. There are ine endings for a lot of creatures. Horses are equine, cows are bovine, rabbits are lapine, foxes are vulpine, pigs are porcine, which ends in ine anyway. Or you could say porcine, but I think it's actually porcine. Fish are piscine. Birds are avian. Doesn't really count. Eagles are aquiline. Deer are cervine. So there's a lot of them. And my first thought was, let's go with that as the naming. So these would actually be called lapines, let me pull that up. When I was putting this together, you can see that was actually the working name for them, was lapines. But then I went to, for each of these animals that I made up, I went to Wikipedia and I read the whole Wikipedia entry on them. Now, for rabbits, I didn't go to the Wikipedia entry for rabbit because I also wanted it to be hares. And rabbits and hares are different, but they both belong to a greater order of creatures, and that is the Leporids. And members of Leporidae are called Leporids, so I just chose Leporids. Now, I understand it's kind of a stupid name, Because the very first thought that a player is going to have, especially since they're going to be coming into this blind. Like, I sit down with my cousin in my gaming group, and I say, you have your choice of races. You can play Calupins or you can play Leporids. And they're going to look at me like, what? And I'm going to say, okay, Calupins are dog people and Leporids are rabbit people. And then they're like, why are the rabbit people lepers? Or why aren't they leopard people instead? So I might very well change it. I might call them Laps or something like that again. The names that I chose so right now are all working names. Everything actually is a working name. I actually added these as options. So, for example, they're Calupin. Not options for what I'll name them, but just like common names that you would call the, that they might call each other. So while the racial name, the kind of scientific-y name for the Calupin is Calupin, other creatures might call them dogs, dogmen, hounds, mongrels. And just like how their name might officially be Leporids, people usually call them rabbitkins, rabbits, hares. They might call them something a little bit more, it could be cute and familial, or it could be kind of insulting to call them ears or leaper. But that's an option. Another thing that I did, which was a very purposeful design choice, was every single race that I make, no matter what the base animal is, they're all going to be medium size and have normal speed. The reason why is because there's no reason that you have to have a short race, that you have to have a small race. The reason why gnomes and halflings in D&D are small is because of the source material. And I don't feel like you necessarily have to have every creature, not every creature, that you have to have entire races that are small. I wanted people to not have to deal with the lower weapon damage, the lower movement speed, the lower carrying capacity, and have to deal with these two sets of rules for everything. So everybody gets to be medium size. And that's where you get the hares. Hares are large rabbit type, large rabbit type creatures. They're hares. They're big rabbits. And so your average leporid is a big hare. Now, just because they're medium size doesn't mean they're all the same size. Bear people are probably much bigger than dog people that are probably much bigger than rabbit people. Rabbit people, while being medium sized, are probably going to be about elf sized, whereas dog men might be, human sized, and bear men might be like half orc sized. There's a scale, even though they all fall into the medium sized category. You can see here they're agile. They get +2 on acrobatics and escape checks. They are jumpers, so they always consider to have a running start. They have rabbit's luck, so +1 on all saving throws. Sprinter, so they get the bonus movement speed. This at the bottom here are just the names that come from the actual type of animal, just in case I want to add that in. That goes into two different realms here of world creation. What I'm presenting in this video is just kind of the mechanical world creation. And in a future video, once I'm still very much in the process of thinking out how I want it to be, I'll detail a little bit more the flavor kind of world creation. There was I'll get into that later. But as far as how I want the world to work, that's changed. Now, I will mention for the flavor aspect, that's one of the reasons why the languages are highlighted. And that's because rather than everybody having a racial language, I'd prefer to break it up by region, actually. I'd like to see a campaign world where languages are not race dependent, but actually location dependent. So there is no rabbit language or dog language. It's based on the country and the area you're from. The only problem with that is that it makes the language, unless you're dealing with small language groups that are very close together, kind of like a compact European feel, you're dealing with, for the most part, no language barriers in the game. Now, that's a good thing for a normal play. How many people actually pay attention to what languages do you speak and force it to become an issue? But it's a bad thing in that you can force it to become an issue, and particularly when we get to the next race who have bonuses to learning languages. So these are the Leporids. I like them. They're cute. Now I'll go back up here. I did create alternate racial traits for these races. These are not necessarily... undo that. Not necessarily all the alternate racial traits, but I wanted to be like the book. The biggest thing I wanted for Calupin was actually the ability to be small. But you can see here, the names are going to be different. But basically, here's a scent ability. You have a Bloodhound pedigree, and you give up the Bloodhound ability. So you lose these, you lose your skill bonuses, and in exchange you get scent. Greyhound pedigree gives you your sprint back. Mage Hunter, this comes from the original thing that I talked about before, where they like to hunt down wizards. Mastiff gives you a better bite attack to get you back to a decent, instead of a dagger, at least a short sword. And then the Toy pedigree, which makes you small. I wanted there to be an option to be small, but I didn't want it to be something that you were forced to be small. And that came about because, obviously, dogs range in size. You have everything as big as a Great Dane and everything as small as a teacup Chihuahua. Right now, the only thing that... all the rest of the races just have their own small racial trait that's an option. So far, I think only Calupin's actually has another effect in that lowers their bite damage, and I might get rid of that. The system treats medium size and small size both as 0 points, so there's no point difference between them. And technically, if you're small size, your speed stays at 30 feet per second. Wow, everybody's super fast. No, your speed stays at 30 feet per round, because slow speed is actually -1 point. So that would mean that if I did lower these small size characters to a 20-foot move speed, I'd have to give them something to make up for that. I wouldn't have to, but it only seems right to. But now, if your character concept is a smaller character, there's an option to do that. Same thing with the Leporid. So I gave them some alternate abilities, eyes and ears. I realized after I created the race, and I think I had actually created the next race before I went back and started adding these racial traits, I didn't give the perception bonus to the dudes with the giant ears. You would think they would have a perception bonus. So if you wanted to play you can give up your bonus to acrobatics and escape artist checks, and instead get a bonus on perception and gain low light vision. Part of that also came from the Wikipedia entry where it mentions the not night vision per se, but the night vision of the rabbits. Hiders. So rabbits don't have a fight or flight response. They actually have a flight or sit tight response. If you threaten a rabbit, and this is the reason actually why magicians use rabbits, you can train the rabbit, or you can pick out the type of rabbit that when it becomes scared just sits very still and doesn't do anything. They're very docile. So this one gives you a +4 bonus when you're not moving to hide. And instead, you're not a very good jumper because you're not going to be jumping away. You're still going to get sprinter though, because even the rabbits that just sit still and try to hide, eventually they do take off. I'll mention also, magicians are one of the reasons why you have the +2 intelligence, because you think if there's any kind of... if there's going to be any type of creature that's going to be really good at casting magic spells, it's going to be the rabbit from the hat. And that's also part of where the rabbit's luck comes from. This is the exact same ability that halflings get. They have halfling's luck, and it gives them a +1 on all saving throws. But a lucky rabbit's foot, of course, is going to give you the bonus too. And that might even be why people hunt them down and kill the rabbit people. Rabbit. Now, see, I keep calling them rabbit people, but remember I said these are hares. If you're a rabbit, you're smaller. So you just become size small, and that's it. No other bonuses or penalties. You gain the size small bonuses. And then Trail Runner, which was an ability that you can move through difficult terrain in forests without penalty. It doesn't cost you extra movement speed in forests. And that kind of... you give up Sprinter, so you're not as fast, but you... if you're going through rough terrain, one square, this is one extra square of rough terrain. So this guy actually moves through rough terrain much faster, and so that lets you run through all these, bushes and brambles and tangles and what have you. You'll actually get away faster than if you were using Sprinter. That was the point of that. Now you can see a bit of a theme here in that we have movement abilities, movement abilities, movement abilities, and that's kind of the theme behind the Leporids. I wanted them to have a lot of movement kind of skills. The next race I created, Aves. Once again, their name comes from their taxonomy. I was going to call them avians. I think that was my original descriptive term. But I unfortunately couldn't think of a nice name. I'm like featherhead, bird brain. These are the kinds of things I call birds. I don't like birds. I think birds are dirty, disgusting, nasty animals. But I had an idea in mind. Now, I mentioned before that I wasn't going to talk about the kind of world setting, but I have to because the Aves actually came about from an idea in that. My thought was I knew I didn't like cat people, but if I was going to include cat people, it would probably be like there would be this lion king. And he would be like, the royal family would be like the only cat people for real. I don't know if that's the word I want to say. There would be, the royal family are cat people and nobody else is. They're this special kind of divinely mandated ruler, and all the other animals serve the king of the jungle, and that's just the way it is. And my thought was bird people would be emissaries. They would be the diplomats, the courtiers, the message bearers, because that's the kind of thing you think of with birds. You have your messenger pigeons, obviously of almost every animal. I'm going to leave a little bit of wiggle room here. Birds are going to travel the furthest, especially migratory birds. They're traveling hundreds and thousands of miles in their migration, and they spread out to the corners of the earth. So they would make good messengers and diplomats and emissaries. So I wanted them to be good at that. Once again, the design for this came from Disney's Robin Hood. Now, funny enough, it actually wasn't any of the bird characters in there. It's certainly not the big fat chicken lady, who was not Guinevere. Maid Marian's, I don't know exactly what her relationship was, but like maybe a maid. A maid short for maiden. No, my actual thought was when Robin was dressed up as the big stork guy during the archery contest. And what were the things that he had? Well, he was a quick thinker. He was very personable. He lied very well. He was good at disguises. So and of course, when you think of birds in general, you think of them having pretty songs and, pretty feathers and plumage and colors and what have you. Graceful when they fly. Originally, these guys were actually +2 dexterity and charisma, -2 constitution because they have hollow bones. Oh, is this bolded? Yes, it is. But later on I changed it, and we'll get to that in the very next spot. Anyway, so these guys are very focused, and they might be even too focused on social skills. So you can see that they have +4 bonus on diplomacy to gather information, and knowledge, history, and local become class skills. If you take a class that offers those as class skills, then you get a +2 bonus instead. Greedy, they like shiny things. I'm actually probably going to change that to something like shiny. But they get a bonus on appraise checks for precious metals and gemstones. That's normally a dwarven ability. Emissary, they can roll twice when making bluff or diplomacy checks and take a better roll. And then Weather Savvy, because it's an ability that's in the Race Builder Guide that I really, really wanted to use, and it just fits for bird people. They can tell you what the weather will be tomorrow. So birds are also the weathermen of the world. So you can see that for your basic bird brain character, you would definitely want to play kind of like a bard or a wizard who focuses on knowledge, knowledge skills, things like that. You could definitely be a druid. You don't have the ability score bonuses in this section for it, really, but you have the weather savvy, which makes, some sense. You can definitely play a thief or a rogue character. You've got your ability to make a really good bluff check once per day. You've got a bonus on appraise checks so that you can sell off your goods to the fence. You've got this knowledge local ability so you can get your contacts in. And then Now, there's no particular bird that I had in mind. Oh, and here's their special ability with languages. They can learn actually any language. Compared to the other animals, if I do go with the languages by country or by area kind of feel, birds are presumably well traveled enough that they can actually learn any of the languages of the kingdom. They don't have to pick from a particular list like the other ones would have to. So that's kind of one of their other abilities. You actually have to pay a race point to get that as your language choices. Now, like I was just saying, I didn't have a particular species of bird in mind for when I was creating the aves. It can basically be any type of bird. But there are certain birds where this doesn't seem to make sense. The very first one, which you see here at the bottom, is carrion eaters. So something like a vulture man, like from Thundercats, whose voice I definitely can't do. But here you gain scent ability, but you can... Ooh, excuse me, I got the hiccups. You can only smell corpses and the badly wounded. And you get a bonus against disease, ingested poison, and becoming nauseated or sickened. So this replaces Curious and Emissary. So you give up your ability to know about stuff, and you give up your ability to reroll Bluff and Diplomacy, and instead you get this Scent ability, some other stuff. So then you're more of a vulture type. False Expert. Screw actually knowing stuff. Instead, we're just going to be really good at lying to people. Little Bird. That makes you small. Because, you know, where did you find out about that? Well, a little bird told me. That's exactly why this is called Little Bird. Magical Linguist. I realized that for most of the races I had in mind, I did not have any overtly magical abilities to give them. For the most part, I wanted magic in this world, and this is getting kind of into the flavor aspect of it. I wanted magic to not be something inherent to someone. Just like if you would think in the real world, if, for example, a wizard or something existed, I didn't want it to be something that was inherent to you as a race. They talk about, for example, who was it that said it? It might have been Morgan Freeman or Samuel L. Jackson, or I'm not sure who it was, but they talk about the concept of the magic Negro. It's a character that comes up in movies and books and plays and what have you, where if you need someone who has, you know, weird powers and magic and connection to the spirits, you can just make them black and it makes sense. For example, the witch from Pirates of the Caribbean. What was she? She was a black islander. She was the magic Negro. So I wanted to avoid something where it was attributed to a whole race, where it's like birds happen to be the magic people. I didn't like that. I didn't want that. But in a very focused area, for example, Magic Linguist, where you're learning comprehend languages, message, read magic, and arcane mark. Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and give them that. And it tied into the thought of them being kind of the scribes and the courtiers. And so you'd have this intelligent bird guy who was very well read. But that's an ability they've got. Night Owl, because obviously there's owl types. So these guys get dark vision instead of low light vision. They also lose greedy, because dark vision is better. Plus, you would think that if they're out in the middle of the night in the dark, they probably can't see the shiny metal bits as well. So they probably don't have greedy. Silver-tongued. So here, they actually just get a flat bonus on bluff and diplomacy. And they can be even extra diplomacied. So they lose the ability to roll twice and take the better roll, and instead gain the ability to just really shift the creature's diplomacy. And then Warbeak, because we need our eagle-headed dudes. And so they get a bite attack for 1d3 damage, and this replaces Curious. So if you're playing a warrior type and you don't really care about having the bonus to diplomacy and the knowledge skills, then screw that. Give me a really crappy beak attack and I'll take it. Once again, the next race I made was not the bears, it was actually rats. So here we have the Murie. Once again, it comes from Muridae, which is the overarching taxonomic. I'm going to say order, but I don't think it's an order really. But it covers rats and mice. It gets both of them in there together. So here, bonus to dexterity and constitution, because when you think of a rat person, you think that they're very nimble and agile, and you also think that they're pretty tough and resistant to disease, but you also think that they're really ugly, or even if they're not ugly, they're distasteful. Medium size, normal speed, dark vision, scavengers, so they get bonuses to appraise checks and to perception to find hidden things. Determine whether food is spoiled or identify a potion by taste. Tinkers, I think of a lot of movies actually will portray mice as inventors in that. For example, The Great Mouse Detective, Disney movie. It's a wonderful Disney movie with a really weird Scottish girl. But her father was like a toy maker who also happens to build a mechanical replica of the Queen. They also are treated as proficient with any weapon they personally craft. I wanted to keep the idea of a rat sword master in my head. They needed to be able to play the part of a sword master. Some of that, it comes from the Mouse Guard comic books. It comes from the Redwall series. It also comes from Rataro from the Thundercats with his dual daggers and the eye of what does he have? The rat's eye, not the cat. See, the Thundercats have the eye of Thundera, which is also known as the cat's eye, and so he's got the rat's eye. Plagueborn, bonus to saves against disease, poison, and becoming nauseated or sickened. Scurry, so that they don't lose their armor class while climbing or crawling across narrow bridges. Now, this is one where I think I've gone a little overboard, because you have a character who's really, really asking to be a rogue, a poison-using rogue at that. They just really, really, really want to be rogues. I even give them bonuses on disable device and use magic device, which are like iconic rogue skills. They get a bonus on appraise checks and perception checks, including traps and secret doors. Rogue, rogue, rogue. Bonuses against, it's ingested poisons, not getting poisoned, but dexterity bonus while climbing or using acrobatics. It just screams rogue. And also, when you look at it together, you have this scavenger, you have this plague-born. And so now these rat-type people are kind of outcasts from society. This was not originally the direction I was going to go with them. I was actually going to make the Geckotan, which we saw in the last video, kind of like the outcast creatures. And the rats were going to be much more accepted. But it didn't work out that way. And I actually haven't added the lizard folk, but I may go back and rework it so that's what happens. In fact, I think for this one, if we go in here, so there's the avians, there's the Murie. Yes, so here's the abilities that I ended up giving them. But here are the abilities which will be, which is where I draw from for alternate racial traits that I was considering giving them as well. So, for example, you can see here a +2 dodge bonus in urban environments. Cornered Fury, they get bonuses when they're the only person left standing and they're below half hit points. Eternal Hope, save versus fear and despair. So I was going to make them kind of like these, kind of like a heroic figure, you know? Traveling around in the city. It's difficult to make me afraid. There's a lot of things about saves versus poison disease. There's like 3 or 4 different abilities that all kind of conferred the same idea of being tough against poison, and I had to choose between them. Climb speed, the ability to get along with rats. The other races, you'll notice that I haven't given them the ability, any kind of bonuses with creatures of their own type. So Calupins don't have any special bonuses with dogs. Rabbit people don't have any special bonuses with rabbits or burrowing animals in general. Part of that is, once again, kind of getting into the flavor of the world creation. If all the character races were going to be animal types, I thought about not having those animals in the world. So there just wouldn't be any dogs or rabbits or birds or rats, which seems kind of weird. So then the next idea was to borrow from Avatar: The Last Airbender. And now, all these animals are actually like combinations of animals. If you remember the episode where they go to Ba Sing Se and they meet the Earth King, he has a pet bear. And they can't wrap their mind around it being a bear. They're like, surely it's a turtle bear, or a dog bear, or, you know, all these other type of combo bear creatures, and it's like, nope, just a bear, plain old bear, all by itself. Oh, and you can see here I was going to give him a bonus to it wasn't so much the overcoming spell resistance, but the bonus to identifying magic items combined with the tinker, which originally was going to be a bonus to craft alchemy. Include a bonus to craft alchemy. I was going to have them kind of be like the builders. So if you wanted to hire an architect, I think Master Tinker, as written in the book, is actually +1 bonus to disable device and knowledge engineering. So if you wanted to have a something built, you would go to the rats, because the rats are the best builders. And that was kind of the original thought. And I might very well rework this race to make that true. They are also going to be the ones who got swarming, which allows you 2 of the creatures to occupy the same square. And if you're both occupying the same square, you count as flanking. But I was only going to give that to mice, which are the small version. You can have it as a medium-sized creature, but here's where I wanted to give like a special bonus for choosing to be small. Oh, I actually have Cornered Fury, is the only one I've done so far. And then I'll replace that. So then we have here the Ursars. Now here you can see it's obviously just I copied and pasted some of the old Leporid abilities, but that's just for the format. Nothing else here is true. Even this is changed now. And actually that'll bring up my last point for this video. I don't know why I called them honey mutts. I'm trying to think of words for bears. Grizzlies, honey mutts. Honey mutts for whatever reason. In putting together the races, I was thinking I don't want too much overlap in ability scores. And so I decided, let's go look at the ability score adjustments for the standard Pathfinder races and see how well I model them. So I made an Excel spreadsheet because I'm a nerd. And here you see that we have dwarves, elves, gnomes, halflings, and then the 3 humans, basically. The equal sign means that they can get a +2 bonus to any one ability score, so they don't really count. Instead, you can see that we have no bonuses to strength, 2 to dex, 2 to con, 1 int, 1 whiz, 2 charisma. So it's a nice spread. Usually it's about 2 per ability score, and then there's these 3 where they're not. And then you've got, 2 bonuses and a penalty, 2 bonuses and a penalty. So for my guys, I tried to keep it similar. Like, the Ursars are going to be the only one with a strength bonus. We have 2 bonuses and a penalty for dex, 2 bonuses and a penalty for con, 2 bonuses, 2 bonuses, and we have a lot of ugly people, is what we're getting at. Calupins and Muries are both upsetting. Now, you see this line here for Mephits. That's a race I haven't drawn up yet. If you want to know what that animal is, go ahead and look up the animal order that would be called a Mephit. And you will know what those animals are. Now, right now, I have them tentatively listed as a no bonuses. You just get a flat +2 wherever you want. But I really want them to have a +2 charisma. Not only because it evens this out, but just because it defies expectation. And but then I'd have to put another bonus somewhere, and to keep things even, the best spot to put it would be strength, but that doesn't make sense for these creatures. So that doesn't seem like it's right. But that is the next option here, is I'm going to make up the Ursar, which are going to have a bonus to strength and wisdom and a penalty to dex. And then the Mephits, which I'm thinking right now are giving them no straight bonuses, just a floating +2. And then if I add the lizard people, they'll be here. But right now, I kind of like this. I've got 6 races, and it offers you a lot of variety. You can build a lot of different characters. And if you look where the penalties lie, it's mostly in charisma. And, I mean, that's kind of upsetting. You're not going to have a lot of rat or dog bards or sorcerers. But, there's nothing getting in the way of being a wizard or a cleric. And there's nothing really getting in the way of the physicals either. Someone's not going to be strong, not as dexterous, or not as healthy. But otherwise, you get your variety, just like you have here. So I kind of like the balance that I've got for now. So Ursars will be the next one I drop. Mephits will be the last one. And like I said, I might very well change the names of the creatures. Because I know what a Murie is, but most other people aren't going to get that Murie means rodent. or, that Ave is bird. Ave they might get. Leporid, they're certainly not going to think of rabbit. Calupin, they may or may... I don't think your average person's going to get that that's a dog. So I might change that, and use these alternate names a little bit more. Like this, put dog, dogmen, hound, rabbitkin, hare, things like that. Birdman, bird. Oh, just as the final point, it'll come up more often in the world building, but I started watching Thundercats, the newer one from 2011, completely unrelated to this. I had been meaning to watch Thundercats, and I sat down and started watching it. And that entire series is built around the fact that you have these royal cats, and that the other races, which are the dogs and the lizards and the birds, were subject to them. And there's a whole bunch of interplay from that angle. And so it fits very well, and it's working up ideas for me. It's kind of acting as an idea engine, but I'm not going to recreate Third Earth and Thundera in doing this Animal Planet. I actually have more of a kind of medieval England, France, knightly orders, the kind of standard fantasy stuff that I like, but I think I need to push it a little bit more. I want to deal more with, like I said, already breaking away from the racial languages and making it kind of area languages. And there isn't going to be like a rabbit country and a bird country and a dog country. You're going to have 5 different countries, and they're going to have all 6 of these races all mixed together, and you're not going to identify as strongly with your race as you do with your country, which is a more modern take on things. If you go through your history class and think back to those lessons, you used to identify with your racial and cultural subgroup, and now you identify on a more national scale. And that started back in the late 19th century and really hit the jingoism, especially approaching World War I, where after World War I, we started drawing these borders and forcing people to identify with nations and states as opposed to their cultural and racial groupings that previously defined them. So, yeah, basically, I'm a nerd, and I'm a nerd. Anyway, until next time, if I can find the way to turn this off. Bye-bye.